I'm Bradley Davis, and I was born about 150 yards right down the street on February the 25th, 1909. Well, our schoolhouse was a 3-room building, rock building, where the lodge hall is now. It was 1 story. Now there were a 3rd room was on the west side of those 2 rooms there, where the elementary school was in the east wing. The high school was occupied the center piece, and the junior high level was on the west side, just a rock on a wooden building, wooden room on the west side of that. And then in the early 20s, when they were building just building 290, well, then they remodeled that old house. They took the 2 rooms, the one off of the west side, and built another story on it. And so that's when that became then a full-fledged high school. Well, we were pretty lucky because we lived right next door to school. Mm-hmm. But they usually start about at 9, and then people that lived away from town had to ride either horseback or in a buggy. Mm-hmm. We had just about 4 acres here, and we didn't have very many things to do. So our time was pretty much on our own.
I see.
Now our house was right in the middle of a pretty good sized yard. And so since my father died, see, before I was 2, my mother kept a pretty tight rein on my brothers and sisters. And so that was the playground for the whole community, was in our yard. And anybody wanted to know where the kids were, they went over to Davis's. There were 10 of us, there were 13 next door. There were 7 just a little way above here, the Spall family. Then on the other side, the Dye family had about 6 or 7. Well, she lived down in Cedar Valley.
I see.
And her husband was Aunt Eveline, and her husband, Uncle Alec, who brought the mail up here.
I see. And
that was an interesting thing. That now it took all day to go from here to Austin by horse and buggy, or ride. But he made a round trip every day.
Wow.
Now how did he do it? Well, he lived down there just, the highway department has a yard there close to where he lived. And he had 4 of the finest teamed horses that money could buy.
Yes, sir.
Well, we'll just name them Team A, B, C, and D for convenience. All right, about 3 o'clock in the morning, he would leave home with first he'd put Team A in the wagon yard in Austin, the Leonard's wagon yard. All right, then about 3 o'clock in the morning, he would take Team B and race them to Austin, all the way, just as fast as they could go. And he'd get to the wagon yard and trade teams. Pick up Team A and leave B. All right, with the Team C then that he picked up, he would get the mail and anything that people wanted him to bring back, and then he would race them back to his home, and then he would take the last one and race them to Dripping Spring, and then trot them back. And so that way, well, every 3rd day was free for those horses. But because he would race them those short distances each time like that. So he made a round trip every day. He got to Dripping Spring about mid-afternoon with the mail and whatever things that the people wanted to bring out for him. Well, we had played marbles, the big game, and every little boy had a pocket knife.
Yeah, sure.
And we played Mumbly Pig. Do you know about Mumbly Pig?
Yes, sir, I do.
Well, we played Mumbly Pig. and little things like that. And then they would play. They just throw the baseball around. We didn't have much of a playground there. It was just the open space south of the old building, covered with gravel. And then somebody gave them a basketball. They throw but we didn't have at first. We just didn't have really teams there. But then when they got big enough schools around, you see, Dripping Springs was kind of the center of a wheel, with it was big in the center, and there was Cedar Valley, and Fitzhugh, and Bell Spring, and then over at Hamilton Pool, and then Henley, and Mount Sharp, Mount Gainer, Driftwood, and there's 2 or 3 little schools. But at one time or another, there were 13 little one-teacher schools in the area right around here.
Amazing.
Then when automobiles came into being, and people began buying them, and they would begin to consolidate into schools, and it was the rivalry between these various little schools were quite intense. Well, not just intense, they were hostile. Anytime we went to play baseball, for example, there would always be fistfights take place. There were certain families just simply didn't agree to anything but a big brawl, fistfight. Well, after they got to paved roads and automobiles, then began consolidating the schools, that rivalry cooled off quite a bit. And then, not many years ago, there was a young lady played basketball for Dripping Springs, whose father had grown up at Mount Gainer. And he's sitting next to me at a high school basketball game, and he was rooting for Molly. Well, now that she was on the Dripping Springs team, so then he was rooting for Dripping Springs. So I turned to him, Miss Forrest, I said, "You amaze me." "What was that?" I said, "Well, that when you've seen everything, it's time to die." "Well, what do you mean by that?" I said, "Well, when you've seen everything, it's time to die." "Well, what have you seen?" I said, "I have seen a guy from Mount Gainer rooting for Dripping Springs." Graduated in '32, which was right at the very, that was the very height or depth, I might say, of the Great Depression. Now, I was a pre-med student for about 3 years, and in fact, I became a real good friend to a young man whose grandfather had reared him up at Plainview, and he was fairly wealthy, and he was going to send me and his grandson to medical school. But that was when the bottom went out, and instead of getting $1.20 to 30 cents for his wheat, he got 19 cents.
Oh, gosh.
So that put a stop to that. Well, I changed over from pre-med to education.
I see.
And I've been happy ever since that I did.
I can tell.
Because then when I graduated with teaching certification, and then I had a hard time finding a job. Well, I went to Dallas and worked as a sort of a carpenter for a while there, while I was trying to find someplace to teach school. And I came back here, and a young lady was leaving the junior high level to go into homemaking, and so I took over and finished her school year. Now, our school year was 5 months in length. The salary was $80. So I had taught school 35 years, but that was a paid vacation.
That good.
That we had more fun, and it was a picnic every day. From then on, the war was on. So then I went to Miami Beach then for 6 weeks, and then was shipped by train to Randolph Field for assignment, and then went back to Houston to Ellington Field, where I stayed for 2.5 years as an Air Force ground instructor. Yeah, so we were not flyers. We were just ground instructors at these meteorology and anything like that. See, and so anyhow, well, I worked on that. Then after about 2.5 years of that, they knew that they were going to win the war, but they didn't know when. And besides, when the last shot's fired, what are we going to do with our men while they waited to go home? Well, let's put them in school. They went into school. So I was fortunate in having been chosen to go to Italy for to set up an education program all the way from elementary through college. I worked in the college level, and I was the only person who worked all the way through that, from the order to the locating it, setting it up, operating it, and closing it out. And I was there every day of that whole time. The Applewhite store was a grocery, just a general store with, just a general everything, clothing and all. And it was, this, you know where the thrift shop is, and where the corner store down there, where was the garage for a long time. There was no wooden building right there. That was the Applewhite store.
I see.
And then the Patterson store was the one over there to the west of where the post office is, in that rock building.
Yes, sir.
And then across the street from that was another rock store, the Dave Jones grocery store. And those two are still there, see. Yeah, they had practically everything that you would need out here. And then there was another grocery store on down where now there's a music store. At the end of that, there was the Carter's grocery store was there. And then where there's used to be a filling station right next to the old Patterson store, a big 2-story square building, had 8 rooms in there.
Yes, sir.
And it was what was called the old hotel. It was 4 rooms upstairs and 4 down.
Okay.
And there was an old well and a windmill right near the corner of where the post office is. That was where there was a community tank there with a trough around in front of it for people to water their horses. It was a little difficult to get down to the creek from there, right. so they fixed it. And there's one of those old stores, one of those old tanks is left at, I think the only one in the state of Texas, at Driftwood.
I see.
And it was being pretty well badly torn down till a few years back. When I started raising roots about that, so they redid it and put a fence around it and all. But I think that's the only one of those. Now there are a good many of those rock tanks out on the ranches.
Yes.
But for a community tank there for people to water their horses when they came to the big town, they had a place to take care of their horses while they were there.
But do you remember the first car you saw here in town?
No, I don't remember the first one that I ever saw because we'd go to Austin and see them.
Maybe that's where.
But
was there a
the first
Stanley
one I
Steamer?
ever rode in,
Yes.
that was an old Stanley Steamer.
Okay.
It belonged to a cousin in Austin, and my older brother borrowed it and came out here so we could see it. And all, but he left it sitting too long. The fire was out,
Oh my goodness.
so we had to build a fire in the firebox so he could take us for a ride.
A Stanley
And so
Steamer.
we went up the road here, nearly at the top of the hill this way. We went up toward Johnson City, I don't know, about a mile out that way. We went up the Creek Road a short way. We went down to the Norwoods that way. We went up to Wallace Mountain this way, and it came on back. But that was the first automobile that I ever rode in. I was amazed not long ago when someone told me that they had asked this elderly lady what was the biggest change that in her lifetime, and she said screen wire.
Screen wire. Wow.
Flies were so bad.
Flies. Sure. Sure.
And I remember when I was a child, we didn't have screen wire. And the flies would be so bad that somebody had to had to keep motion over your dinner table.
Yeah.
Keep the flies off of
Yes, sir.
your food.
Sure.
See, when they first put electricity to the school, they got playing basketball out on the court there. They would hang a basket, had 100 light bulb at each end of the court.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
There was lighted basketball.
Lighted basketball. I'll be darned.
There'd be one light bulb hanging in the classroom. And I know when we moved out to the ranch out there, we had a phone shortly, and there were 16 phones on that line.
You had a party line. Big
Yeah.
party line.
Yeah.
16. Wow.
Our number was 2 longs and a short.
I'll be darned.
If you know what that means.
Yeah.
I do. My grandparents had a phone like
I
that.
grew up with that.
So when you rang, the phone rang, you could count the people picking up the telephone to eavesdrop.
Yes. Yes.
I remember my mother was talking to an old man about his livestock. See, we had that 1,100-acre ranch out there, and this guy was a dealer. He'd buy up livestock and put them in our place. I think it was 25 cents a day for a head of cattle in there, but he lived over at Fitzhugh, and he'd bring them down to Barton Creek and put them in over there, and Mama had no way to check up on him, and she considered him trustworthy and dependable, so he kept his own books. So anyhow, he was talking discussing, she was talking with him on the phone, and when she hung up, phone rang, she said, "Hey, Miss Kate, I was late getting to the phone a while ago." She said, "I didn't understand just how was that?"
School bus drivers here for Dripping Spring. Can you tell us a little about that?